I have a confession. I feel weirdly embarrassed about my herbalism at home. People online who, they're so aesthetic. I just want to kind of push back against this image of herbalism needing to be sort of all witchy and cottagecore, needing to be all like beautiful and aesthetic. And I just kind of want to show a bit of the reality of what it could be like to handle herbs at home. In this episode, I thought that I'd talk about the differences of practicing herbalism at the farm as opposed to foraging and what I do at home. Because while the plants and their uses are of course the same, the logistics are very different. With the coming of summer, the work at the farm has been harvesting, and nothing but harvesting. Well, okay, that's a lie. We have done a little bit of planting too. We planted out all of the remaining Tulsi seedlings, but we also planted out about 80 French lavender that Agnes had ordered as full plants, which we only received at the end of June, which is why we were still planting them out. But apart from that, it's been harvesting. It really feels ridiculously idyllic, as it is quite literally just picking flowers like the malva and the Californian poppy and the cornflowers. It's beautiful, it's peaceful, and it smells lovely. Harvesting the St. John's wort also felt particularly special. Not only was it a delight to see how much the bees loved these flowers, St. John's wort only blooms once a year. Traditionally, it's said that it blooms on midsummer and that is the most magical time to pick it. Ours actually came out a little bit later than that, but then we harvested all of it at once. Just a quick clarification on malva, by the way. In the last vlog, I said it was hollyhock, which isn't strictly true. Malva, mallow, hollyhock, these are all related, but not quite interchangeable plants. Point is, just check your flowers before you eat them. Anyway, there's two new things that I've had to get used to about harvesting at the farm. The first is using a sickle. We use a sickle when we want to harvest the full stem of a plant rather than just plucking the flower. So we use it for things like mint, motherwort, hyssop, sage, yarrow, and so on. And I'll be real with you, I suck at using it. There's meant to be this angle that allows you to just snip off the stems, super easy, but I just struggle to find that angle and I seem to end up cutting myself way more often than I should. I have been getting better, but the movement just doesn't seem to agree with my brain. The second thing I've had to get used to at the farm is the sheer quantities of everything. Like when we've been harvesting kilos upon kilos of chamomile from our huge bed. Or when we create the community supported agriculture boxes, or the CSA boxes, where people pay a subscription to get fresh herbs delivered to them every month. We end up with a small production line in order to handle all of the different herbs, though it's far better than any factory. Processing the plants to be dried and packaged also feels very new to me. When we need to separate the leaves and the flowers from the stems, and there's very large amounts of the plant, you don't want to be doing it all by hand. So we garble the plants, which means rubbing it on a wire mesh so that the leaves and the flowers fall through and the stem is left above. This process produces huge amounts of dust, so we have to wear masks whilst we're working. And so the reason that all of this feels so strange for me, and to work with such large quantities of herbs, and this practice of cutting everything you see, is because I got into herbalism through foraging. I can barely remember the origins of my herbalism now, because I really just stumbled onto it. A few years ago, I started seeing posts about herbs, I think on Pinterest, and then I think I saw one about yarrow having medicinal properties, and I thought, I think I've seen that plant around here, and the rest is history. So my first forays into herbalism were going into meadows like this one and picking yarrow, St. John's wort, and then in the autumn, rose hips. I like to follow certain rules when foraging. The main rule is quite a famous one for me, one for you, and one for nature. So in other words, only picking about a third of what you see. On top of that, I don't take anything that an insect has got to first. I just feel like it's finders keepers. Or if there's like a larger area where there's only one plant, I won't take that because otherwise it won't be able to self-seed. Finally, I don't take a plant when I feel resistance. And this one's a little bit more ephemeral, difficult to explain. But if I'm just having a hard time picking it, or maybe I just get this strange sense that this particular plant doesn't want to be touched, I leave it. For me, it's really about respecting the plant as a living being and being very carefully attuned and not thinking that I can just take everything because it's there. It seems that over the last few years that foraging has made a bit of a comeback, and it's wonderful that more people are learning this skill. And foraging is a fantastic way to be outdoors and paying attention to the plants and even the animals that we share our home with. I also think that it's important to dispel the myth that nature is meant to be this untouched realm of like nature reserves and protected areas. And instead, foraging can help show that humans can have a respectful and beneficial relationship to meadows and forests. But it is so important that foraging is just that, respectful. That taking from the wild is understood as receiving a gift, and that we must leave enough to allow the area to regenerate. So when those of us at the farm all went out to a place outside of the city to go foraging for a day, I admit that it did feel a bit strange to have these huge piles of St. John's wort, red clover, meadowsweet and yarrow at the end of the day. But it was just because there were 4 of us there for several hours picking from a large area. But it's certainly very different to what my herbalism looks like at home. I'm sat on my landing. I use this area for drying herbs mostly because it's at the top of the house and it gets pretty warm. So the way that I dry my herbs at home is primarily this drying rack. And so there's this wooden frame that I just found it in the basement one day. I live in a collective and lots of people have passed through the house and left things behind. I have no idea what this thing is, but it seemed like I could attach a piece of fabric, and so that's what I've done. I've literally just got masking tape to attach this random fabric that I found in a charity shop years ago, and it's very it's got like a lot of holes, it's very airy fabric, so I thought it'd be good for drying. And then I've also got the one underneath. It doesn't normally sit here, it normally sits over in the corner so that there was a bit of air underneath and above. Probably not the best for airflow in terms of positioning, but like I said, this landing gets pretty hot. And actually things have been drying really well. I haven't been having a problem with things like oxygenating or anything like that. Things look good by the time they finish drying, so it seems to have worked. As you can see, there's not a huge amount of space here, so I tend to focus on the delicate flowers that aren't gonna, if you hang them, they would just sort of drop pollen and drop petals and stuff. So this is the meadowsweet, for example, and St. John's wort. Also all of the chamomile I dried here too. But for things that can hang, I've had 2 methods. So one of them is to create these bunches out of, this is sort of plants with good stems and where you are going to be taking the leaves. So this is mugwort, for example, got a good stem on it, it's got all the leaves. You just tie it into a bunch, hung this up on my curtain rail, the end of the curtain rail, so it's not in the sun because the sun can damage it and stuff. And yeah, this has dried really well. But I also got the tip from one of the volunteers at the farm this year to put herbs in little bags and then hang the bags up. So she recommended pillowcases. I've been using just random cloth bags that I have around. I also use these old rice bags, so I could do it with the red clover, for example. I was able to just put that into the bag, hang it up, because it's sort of shielding it a bit. You don't have to worry quite so much about sunlight damaging it. So that was good. It's been hanging for way longer than it needed because I'm ADHD. Well, I mean, actually, but also I'm really bad at remembering to sort things. So things end up hanging for a very long time before I deal with them, which is why I've got so much now and why I've got a lot to process. What I actually tend to do with the hanging herbs is hang them from my fairy lights, and then I have quite a lot of space along my bedroom where I have room for all of the different bunches. But even that's chaotic, man, because the fairy lights keep falling down from the weight of it. And I guess that's sort of actually one of the things that sort of struck me when I first went to the farm and I went to Agnes's drying room, and she has all these custom made drying racks and everything was so beautiful, and it's also easy because you have just simple drying racks. Yes, that is meadowsweet. That's the other thing. I'm also a chronic non-labeler. Do not do that. Label your herbs. I've labelled them now. But you don't want to be sniffing random bunches going, is this motherwort? I think it's motherwort. Just label your stuff. Big tip. And I'm saying that to myself as well. All of this applies to my remedy making as well. Honestly, a lot of the time, my remedy making is me very tired at night after foraging or after harvesting and going, oh crap, I need to put the stuff in the tincture, or I need to deal with this, and doing it last minute. And I also will admit I'm not particularly good at measuring stuff and measuring quantities. I sort of just judge it by eye. That's worked. Sometimes it hasn't worked. Other times in the last few years I've made a calendula and St. John's wort salve, which came out really good. But I've also had some losses. I once tried to make a St. John's wort oil that went mouldy, which was a shame. But now I'm using Agnes's technique. so hopefully that will work. Herbalism, like anything, can be started even when you don't have all of the skills and tools and knowledge in place. Because, I'm sitting here saying, oh my God, I never remember to do this, and I leave things hanging for way too long. But also, this is everything I've got this year. I've got jars full from previous years as well. I've got stuff. And when my friends get ill, I've got stuff I can give them. My drying methods certainly wouldn't pass any food safety laws, but they work. I've got good quality herbs here that taste good and feel good and smell good. I just guess I want to be a little representative of the non-aesthetic, slightly chaotic and ADHD herbalist gang. Like, it's really a gift, and you can receive that gift without being perfectly organised and perfect in your skills and stuff. Welcome to my herb spiral. So I have shown you my herb spiral before in the first episode, but she has developed quite considerably since then. As you can see, the sage, absolutely thriving, which is wonderful. Some lemon balm there. Didn't mean to have that much lemon balm, but there were just lots and lots and lots of babies at the farm. So yeah, I planted all of them, I think. But then I've also put some extra lemon balm that I ended up with in the beds back here. So I've got something like 20 lemon balm plants, but that's fine. I love lemon balm. Then back there on the other side, I've got the peppermint here, the mint there, and then the chocolate peppermint. And then this is the wonderful oregano, which is very popular amongst the bees and the butterflies right now. Up here, I tried to have echinacea. This is one of the echinaceas, but they're just not growing. I've also planted some echinaceas back there, and they're also just not growing. Also, it doesn't help, I am pretty damn sure that there is a cat that keeps coming along here and digging things up, because this does not look like how it should look. So there is a cat that I have a vendetta against, and I think I know his name. I think it is Timmy. And then I tried here, where you can see all the eggshells, I tried to plant basil. They survived for like several weeks, but every time they put out new leaves, slugs got them. And you can see I tried with the eggshells. I don't know what you're meant to do. I've really had a problem with slugs. I did actually go around here and like really cut back all the vegetation, and you can see I've like put some sticks down and stuff. It's kind of like my equivalent of wood chips, because I don't have wood chips, just to try and like maybe discourage the slugs. And I think it did help. I think there has been less of a problem with slugs, but the slugs apparently just adore the heck out of basil, and they will go for it every time. I also have back here the skullcap, which actually I hadn't noticed is blooming, so that's lovely. And because I was able to get lots of plants from the farm, I ended up expanding past the spiral into these beds that I've had for years. So this is some valerian, and then a couple of motherwort. And this is a test lavender that I tried. It was a rescue case. We were going to see if I could rescue it. I have not rescued it, but that's okay. I've got one actual healthy lavender plant over on the spiral, and I think I might move it so that it has more space to grow. And then I've got some more plants on the bed back here as well. You can see at the top of the spiral is the rosemary. That is the only plant that I've actually bought, because the rosemaries at the farm were too small to like get propagations from or anything. I actually splashed out and bought a rosemary, and I'm hoping to bring it in over the winter so that it can hopefully survive. We will see. So apart from the sage, which is doing just so well, and probably the oregano and the lemon balm, I'm probably not going to be harvesting a huge amount. I did harvest some chamomile back when it was there, but I didn't actually get that huge amount. Won't have a lot of mint because the mint hasn't grown. The mint was also being decimated by the slugs at the beginning. It's now big enough and it's surviving okay, but it hasn't like got really big. And obviously things like the valerian need, I think, a couple of years for the roots to get big enough to be worth harvesting. My gardening is as chaotic as my herbalism and the drying methods. I don't know a huge amount. I've just sort of picked up things here and there by going to the old community garden and just Googling sort of as and when I need to know something. I would really like to properly make sure I'm learning more about gardening. I'd particularly like to know more about permaculture. But I think the main thing that I've learned is that my garden is forgiving. Because I said in the first episode how I tried to build this herb spiral before. This is the first year it's looking this verdant. Is that the word? Verdant? Certainly the first year I'm going to be like harvesting decent amounts of anything. Even when I've been chaotic, even when my herb spiral hasn't worked out, even when I haven't had enough soil or plants, every year my garden has given me red clover, dandelion, goldenrod, hops and rose hips without me even lifting a finger. And that is such a blessing. I also realise, like, you know, the fact that I have this garden space is just incredible, and I'm so grateful for, you know, the people who came before in this house who planted all of these things as well. But also that the meadows and the forests are even more generous. I mean, we've got to look after those too, and we've got to fight to protect them, but they keep growing and they keep giving. But that's why I really wanted to talk about the differences between working at the farm versus foraging and then also at home. And I guess what I kind of want to say, partly to remind myself, but also for other people. I think I'm maybe speaking here to fellow neurodivergent people who maybe struggle with like managing lots of different tasks or struggle with sort of coming into a new hobby or a new area of knowledge. It is okay if you forget to label a jar and have to do a sniff test a year later. It's perfectly all right if you just want to forage that one weed that you can recognise confidently. The important thing about herbalism and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it on this channel and you know, share what I'm learning is because I'm such a believer in practical skills and how important it is for all of us to be learning something practical in this world where we are driven towards like very cognitive digital skills, and we're unfortunately going towards a world where we're going to all be having to pay a lot more attention to how we are sustaining ourselves and how we are surviving in a changing climate. So a practical skill is the most important thing. Not only advocating for that, not only advocating for the fact that I think everyone should be learning something practical, and it doesn't have to be herbalism. I think everyone should be learning a skill that is good for you and good for the earth. You don't need to worry about becoming an expert. You can just do what you do, and that is still such an important development in your and your community's skill set. So that's the important thing. And then, of course, the beautiful thing is that the flowers will keep growing. We can be facing a lot of changes in the coming years, a lot of shifts in the climate, and we don't know what's going to survive and we don't know what's going to die out, but I am certain that the flowers will keep growing.